Dr. Janice Campbell.
Hello. Good
How
morning.
are you?
I'm
Good
doing well.
morning. You are joining me from the other side of the ocean, in Baltimore. Am I
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
An hour north of DC.
Okay. Yeah. I am definitely learning the US map through Zoom calls and Content College Club.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for joining me. We have a lot to talk about. You are a fellow octopus, and being a fellow octopus, you have many tentacles out there, including some elephant connections.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about Janice Campbell and.
Hmm. Okay. Where to start? Um, my first career, I was a theatrical stage manager for
Mhm.
about 15 years. I accidentally fell into that. I thought I was going to be a designer, and then I thought I was going to be a scenic artist, and then I kind of got kidnapped into it, but that's a very long story all on its own. Um, by the same woman who informed me that I needed to have a kid, and like 24 hours later I was pregnant. She
Oh
was a
wow!
very powerful individual. Um, but so I did that for about 15 years, and then I ran away to become an acupuncturist, and which was a little bit of a shock to everybody because I'm pathologically afraid of needles. And so like I have O positive blood, and the Red Cross has asked me not to come back unless it's an emergency because I get really shocky and I turn paler than I already am, and I start talking really fast and really quietly in very large words, and it freaks other people out. And so they're like, we know your blood is helpful, but let's not scare everybody else unless it's an emergency. So the fact that I ran away to be an acupuncturist was a little crazy. The reason I did was my my father developed a brain tumor, and we went down to look after him while he was dying in Georgia. And um, with that came I had kicked asthma. I had had asthma for years. I'd gotten it in like 1989, and then around 94 I had kicked it. I'd learned exercises, I'd done all sorts of stuff. I'd hacked my lungs out for 4 months, and I was off my meds. And then when he passed away, my asthma came back with a fury. And when I got back to Minneapolis, a friend of mine said, I learned that through Chinese medicine that grief is associated with your lungs. You should go see this acupuncturist. And despite the fact that I was terrified of needles, I was like, I don't care, because I was actually carrying a nebulizer machine with me everywhere I went, and I was barely making it the 3 hours between treatments. I was like contemplating my own mortality at that point. And so I go to see this guy, and he had just arrived in the Twin Cities, and it was not some deeply Zen moving thing. It was the entire time he was putting needles in my back, he was having me teach him how to swear appropriately in English. When is this a verb? When is this a noun? Can you say this? Do you put an ing on this word? It was very technical swearing coaching.
101.
Luckily I was a stage manager, so I swore like a sailor, so I had it down. I could help him out. But I thought he was kind of a jerk. But the point of it was that I had walked in feeling like I was wearing 12 x-ray vests on, those lead vests they put on you. I felt like I was weighed down by about 12 of them. I got off the table and 9 of them were gone.
Oh wow.
And I didn't suddenly go, I'm going to go do this for a living. I spent a year. I got a job. I left theater. I got a job as a production manager for television for a company that was doing shows for Home and Garden Television. I did that for a year, which was like a part-time job. It was only 40 hours a week, and they let me out when the sun was shining, and they gave me 2 days off in a row. And so I was doing things like rewiring the attic and landscaping the yard and refinishing furniture and planting a garden. And in the course of that, I was announcing all the different things I was going to do next as my next career. And I would announce something, and all my friends and family would leap on the bandwagon, and I'd leap off, and then I'd go find something else. And one morning I woke up, and I didn't say to anybody, actually, it was like an epiphany. It was like, I'm going to acupuncture school. And I got online and I looked at schools on the East Coast because we wanted to get back to the East Coast near friends and family. And I could be closer to my mom. And I didn't want to, the schools in the Northeast looked a lot like regular colleges. And so I was not interested in that. Didn't want to go to Florida. I hate hot weather, despite being raised in Georgia. And in Maryland at the time, there were 2 colleges. And so I sent away for information. And this is in the rudimentary days of the web. So, this is like the year 2000, I think. Yeah. And the first college that is no longer in business actually sent me mimeographed paper. Do you know what those are? Those are mimeographs are pre photocopies. They're a machine. When I remember them from when I was in elementary school. I'm dating myself now, everybody. But there was a machine that had this really smelly purple blue ink on it, and you had to run them off through the machine. And
like a set, like a printer set almost.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. And I remember as a kid, like getting a test and it was like, don't touch the ink yet. Everybody has to wave them around. And we probably all got some horrible, precancerous cells from breathing in the ink. But anyway, they sent me in the year 2000, this other college sent me mimeographed sheets of their information. I was like, okay. And then, what was then the Thai Sophia Institute sent me a beautiful, beautiful brochure. And my undergraduate degree was in editorial design and theater design and technology. And so I was like, oh, this is pretty. I want to go here. And so I entirely blame my friend John Wilson, who designed the brochure, that it's entirely his fault that I ended up going to school there. But only twice in my life have I felt like the Tao has just come along and picked me up and moved me. And once was when we dropped everything and went to Georgia to look after my dad with his brain tumor. Things just came out of the woodwork to take care of all the details. Yeah. And the second one was when we moved for me to go to acupuncture school. Okay. And so acupuncture, and particularly 5-element acupuncture, makes sense to me the way the world made sense to me when I was little. And so the needles are somewhat inconsequential. It's a bit when people always want to talk, when you're an acupuncturist, people always want to talk to you about the needles.
Yeah. Because it's the main thing that you think of.
Yeah. Back in movies, they put like 97 needles in people when normally I put like 6. But I always feel like a little bit, I finally came up with an analogy. I always feel like a poet being asked what it's like to sharpen pencils. Yeah. They're a tool to a much bigger thing that I almost forget. I mean, I have them obviously, and I'm very particular about which ones I use and all of that. And I receive treatment myself because it's nothing like hypodermics. But so anyway, that's how I ended up there. I went to acupuncture school. I was out practicing for a while. I had a friend talk me into going back to being a supervisor in the student clinic. A couple of years after that, an opening came up for the director of the clinic, and they decided that let's get Janice to do it. And so I said, let me think about this, because I had taken all my stage management skills and set them aside in a pretty box in my mind, and I was not going to open that box anymore because it made me crazy. Yeah. And I said, I need to figure out if I can open the lid fast enough to pull out like 3 skills and slam the door shut before all the demons come out with it. And by the time I said yes, they had gave me a contract that they had dated the day they asked me, because they actually paid me from the day that they asked me.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah,
because it was like 2 weeks later that I said yes, but they were so certain that I was going to do it, which
they were right.
In hindsight, I was not going to say no. But that job ended up morphing into what became the director of clinical education, which was in not just the master's level clinic, but the master's and the doctoral level clinic, the external auricular acupuncture sites. And then COVID hit, and my theater training came in. I had been complaining that academia was too slow. Like people would say, we need this right away. And I'd get it to them like a day early, and they'd be, great, we'll use it in 2 years. And I'm like, we're in the world I came from in the theater, we're talking a matter of seconds that you implement something. And so it was just, I was like, it's so glacial. Well, COVID hits, and I'm like, it's okay, I got this. I move at this speed. Have a seat. I'll be back to you in 5 or 6 days. And I ended up creating an online version of the master's and doctoral level clinic that not only gave the students valuable clinical experience, it also allowed them to practice skills that in the fast pace of what the clinic had become in person, those were falling off by the wayside. Yeah. And so it reintroduced them to skills that they got at the very beginning of the program, very embodied work that has enriched, I've been told by students who have graduated since then, has enriched their practices out in the world. And then I set that up and then redesigned it like 5 times in 9 months because, COVID changing things, all the accrediting things for the university changing what they were willing to put up with or allow or whatever. And it was a lot of fun. It was like being in Tech Week in theater nonstop, without, applause. but
no applause. Exactly.
But and so I think it was a good use of me. And then it became more of some of the challenges and the fun and the run of it were it got a little ordinary. And after being able to like run around and invent things and do crazy stuff, I was like, maybe I should leave while I like everybody still. They still like me. And so a year ago, I quit doing that. And in the last year, a lot of things have happened. In the last year, I have started a lot of my own projects. I realize I've spent a great deal of time implementing other people's stuff, having a lot of creative input in some cases, but implementing a lot of other people's stuff. And now I'm having crazy ideas and dragging people into it and getting them to help me with it. And in the midst of all that, I discovered accidentally that I'm dyslexic.
Yeah.
And and a nonlinear thinker. And from that came the octopus movement and a whole world of people that think in similar ways or understandable ways to me. And it's very interesting. I was saying to somebody the other day, on the one hand, pre-octopus movement, I was kind of actually enjoying being the only weirdo in the room and being like the person that's like, look at this crazy thing over here. And it was also really, really just relaxing to suddenly fall into a sea of other octopus that understood. I didn't have to like prep what I was going to say or worry about being too big or too off the wall or have too many tangents to be heard. And now I'm kind of coming back to the center of the pendulum with that, in that it's like, but now we're all special in the room, and now so, and which I still dearly love. I feel very at home in the octopus movement, and it's just it was an interesting realization of, wait a minute.
I can so identify with it, because you used to being the weird one and the one that stands out, and now it's like, but everybody's weird and everyone. And that's really how it should be, but it is an adjustment. Absolutely.
And so anyway, what I've been doing for the last year is, one, I have not talked to or done anything I didn't want to do. To anybody I didn't want to talk to. I mean, obviously like sorting out my cell phone bill, but even then it was not a huge thing. And I'm starting a nonprofit. I'm building an online learning platform. I have my in-person acupuncture practice, which is acupuncture, herbs, and somatic touch. Mm-hmm. And I've also created an online offering for people that pulls things from Chinese medicine, pulls things from my practice, obviously, because I can't shut off those pieces.
Yeah.
But also includes a lot of distance energetic work and empowerment of other people to be able to do their own healing or their own shifting in ways they want to shift. And I call that distance mind body integration. And it allows me to help people around the world.
And it's amazing. I mean, I must say I have experienced it. It's empowering because it's not like you are here and doing this stuff, and it's not like I have to tell you 5 pages or books full of history and make self-diagnosis and do the whole thing. It's, as you say, kind of you spot the elephant in the room quite intuitively, and then you combine all this knowledge about Eastern medicine and all that, but yet in a, I mean, the way that we did it was there was a meditation, and I could visualize it, and it's still something that I can go back to. So now it's become something that's in my toolbox, which is very cool.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. That's good.
Yeah.
And that's part of it is I really want to give tools to people that they can look after themselves. I mean, what I've said about my acupuncture practice, and I think in some ways it's even more so about the DMBI work, is that I'm helping people remember how to respond to the world the way they did when they were small.
And that's what's so beautiful, because I mean, it is all about that simplicity of the world and connecting to it. And I mean, chatting to you, you're also part of the Content College Club, and it's always nice to have that perspective of, okay, but let's have a look at which season it is. Okay, it's spring. Okay, so this is why we're going through this, or it's winter. You know, this is why we're experiencing this, and to connect to those elements. Except for Mercury. You don't seem to be affected by Mercury in retrograde like I am.
Which I don't understand. I need somebody to tell me if I was born during retrograde, because I think that might be the clue, because other people will start complaining about Mercury and suddenly everything will start working better for me. And I'm like, I'm sorry I took all the
communication
away and put it in my pile. But
well, it would be interesting. Maybe that should be something we kind of delve into, to find the exact alignment of where Mercury was at the time of your birth.
Yeah, just to say.
I'm sure we can figure it
how
out.
I made friends with it. But I also tend to be I also tend to sort of accidentally go counter to what's going on. Like even from a 5-element and seasonal perspective, I tend to say that I live upside down because and maybe not for you. Maybe I should be in the Southern Hemisphere. Maybe that's what it was. Because what happens is that in the winter, when everything is slowing down and getting quieter, and even with my training now, or my remembering of how to move with the seasons and everything else, I tend to not pick up speed. I do slow down in the winter, but I tend to be way more present and more solid and more connected in the wintertime than I am in the summertime. And I think part of that also, though, may just have been environmental training as a kid, because in the summer when my father was in the federal government, and in the summer we would go back to the farmhouse in Georgia, which was 7 miles from any child my age, and at any point in my upbringing. And so I, particularly for elementary school and middle school, I would spend my summers entirely by myself, reading and doing logic puzzles and playing pool games against myself. And so for me, summer is about quiet and pulling in, as opposed to, the rest of the world that summer is.
It's just a mindset. It's the different way that you experienced the world. And I suppose I heard something really interesting, and I can never remember who it was. It was an older man. It was one of these videos, shorts or things, of interview with this gorgeous Irish man with grey long hair and a beard. and he was talking about past life regression. He'd experienced giving birth as a Tibetan woman and stuff, and he was putting it all together and saying, but we've all experienced all these things through different embodiments, so that we can get to this point of understanding the world. But in short term, like, that's kind of the long view, but the short view is we take it throughout our lives, and we kind of create this image of the world for ourselves, which is often very different to everyone else around us, and very much an octopus
Yes.
kind of a way to see the world as well.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So tell me about the 5. There is your email, your website, Dr. Janice Campbell, which is kind of a portal to the rest of the things, isn't it?
It is. I've had my private practice website for my acupuncture practice for years. And when I started doing all these other projects over this last year, I realized that when people would want to get to talk to me, whether it was a friend or a family member or a new contact on LinkedIn, I would spend the first 25 minutes trying to explain all the things I was doing. And I was like, this is, one, I should not be taking so much of the airspace. And two, I need to put all this somewhere. And so I finally miraculously got drjanicecamble.com. And on that is all the things that I'm doing. And that way I can say before I meet with somebody, go look at the website, figure out what you want to talk to me about.
That's the thing, because you get that glazed over the thing in people's eyes when you start, so what do you do? And then I just get all nervous and go, well, a few things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What angle shall we start from? I mean, because, what's not on the site is that I'm co-homeschooling my 17-year-old. I do DIY projects around the house. I'm learning classical mandolin, having played folk mandolin for 30 years. I'm doing a lot of other things too, but those don't need to all be on the website. That would be too much even for me. But what was your question?
We were starting off towards the 5 elements. What are these 5 elements, and how do we obviously, next week is it Thursday the 25th, you're going to come, and I'm very excited because we're going to go on a little bit of a journey, I think, within these 5 elements and how we can use it for creativity or in creativity.
2 weeks, right? 2 weeks.
2 weeks, sorry. Yes. Time is an illusion in my world.
It's okay. I just wanted to make sure. So I show up at the right day.
So anyway, tell me first of all, what are these 5 elements? And
okay, so basically in some of the ancient Chinese texts that are still used today and that still inform the practice of acupuncture and herbs and whatnot, it was an agrarian society when this medicine started being used, and people were paying attention to what was happening in the seasons because they were farmers. And they needed it, and they lived by those seasons because of what was going on. And so instead of looking at it in terms of 4 seasons, they looked at it in terms of 5. So there's winter, spring, high summer, and then harvest time and fall. Because there's a very big difference between harvest and that high summer time. Yeah. And then there's also a very big difference between harvest and when things start dying back.
Okay.
And in the earliest, they were set up in a cycle. I should have had a chart ready to show you. Anyway, when they're set up in a 5 point chart, where originally the first chart actually put the harvest one in the middle. So that it was 4 with earth in the middle. And I should say this: winter is associated with the element of water.
Yeah.
Spring is associated with the element of wood.
Yeah.
High summer is fire. Harvest or late summer is earth, and fall is metal. And
fall would be autumn.
Fall, autumn, either one. and so in the original chart, Earth was in the middle, because to some degree there is a little bit of that sweetness and harvesting and transitiony nature of harvest that happens between each of the seasons when they like right now in Maryland we had just this like sweet moment over this last couple of days, and it's starting to warm up now as we've transitioned into with May 1st the energy for summer started rising. And so with the equinoxes in that model, the equinoxes and the solstices are the high points of the seasons, not the beginning, because it's not like nature is a light switch.
No,
it has to build. It builds up in an arc, and then it comes down.
Which never made sense for me, that the solstice is never the beginning. It's kind of it's different.
It's where it comes to its fullest expression, and then it starts descending. And then there's a crossover. Where the like May 1st is a crossover where spring is subsiding and summer is rising.
Okay.
And so
we wish.
Yeah. Well, but it is. It's spring is not just daffodils and pleasant weather. It's a bumpy ride from the deep yin of winter to the high yang of summer. It just is. It's a bumpy ride headed up, and it's a bumpy ride headed down, and people tend to like one or the other better. There's some theories around the fact that that people tend to die in the spring or the fall, because in the spring they're not. And that's not to say people don't die the rest other times of the year, but with spring, it's I just don't have the energy. I just don't have the chi to rise up with the rest of the world anymore. I'm out of here, And with the fall, it's like everything else is letting go. I'll just hop on the ride and go with it. And so, anyway, so that's the 5 elements. And in the medicine that I practice, they're also associated with organ systems and tastes and smells and sounds and colors and emotions, and particularly with the emotions, it's the dual side of the emotions. And in a lot of ways, anything that becomes a creative process, it can have this pattern laid on top of it, to see how things are moving, to see where you're getting stuck, to see how to get to the next thing. Or when in addition to it being sort of the roll around the seasons, that's what we call the nourishing cycle or the Sheng cycle. There's also a control cycle that, depending on the interpretation, creates a star pattern inside the 5.
Okay.
So that the 2 seasons later is controlled by like, for example, fall, the elements of fall can control elements of spring getting out of hand, in the same way that with it being metal and wood, in the same way that using a metal tool can prune a plant.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of template, but it allows things to be in appropriate moderation rather than
connecting them so that they're all connected within this process. Yeah.
Right. And so there's a nourishing cycle, and then there's a control cycle to keep things in balance. Okay. And a lot of the way 5 element acupuncture works is in looking at we listen to 6 pulses in each arm, which for me, being musical, I tend to listen to them like a choir.
Yeah.
It's like, are the altos singing the same song as the sopranos? Have the tenors left to buy pizza? Who's off key? And because we're listening not only to the 12, but we're also listening to their volume. We're listening to the qualities that they have. Do they feel like a bowstring? Do they feel like they have no edges and they're squishing out? Do they feel bigger than, are they pounding and everybody else is quiet?
Yeah.
And those all apply within the 5 element model. That then allows us to take that information in the moment of seeing the person and formulate a treatment plan that allows them to move more smoothly. Because really, it's all about creating a smooth flow of chi.
But it is individual as well. So you would look at how they are experiencing these elements and
in that moment. and in that moment. I mean, I have larger treatment plans for my patients. However, I always am waiting to see what walks in the door.
Yeah.
Because it can be drastically different than what I saw, a week ago.
Or what you preempt, what you kind of expect, because I think that's a big problem that we have within most of the systems, one of which is the medical one, is that it's not person-centered, it's not kind of individual-centered. While Eastern medicine in general, I would say, I'm nervous to generalize, but it is very much connection to the elements, to our surroundings, to our fellow inhabitants, whether they are animals or and our space in it all, instead of just, okay, here I am and my head hurts, therefore I need to drink a paracetamol or something.
Right. Well, and I think it's beyond East and West. I mean, I think it's indigenous organic medicine.
Yeah.
As opposed to, it's almost like, not entirely, obviously, but it's almost like the difference between right brain medicine and left brain medicine.
Yeah.
There's, right. I as part of my acupuncture, I've set up a unique membership program for my acupuncture patients, and part of that is a book group, and we were just had our session last night, and the book is right here. We were reading John Sullivan's book, To Come to Life More Fully.
Okay.
And it and in talking about that, talking about how we're placed in nature and how that moves out and ripples from the individual to the infinite. We were discussing the fact that it's not, there's a quote that he has in there before, I'm paraphrasing, but before there is an explanation, there is story and song and music and movement and poetry.
Yeah.
And it's as though we, it's as though we feel things and things happen, and then we add words on top of them to explain it to somebody else of what happened. It's the same way that a child learns words for emotions.
Yeah.
I'm always asking my patients and also my distance mind body clients, where do you feel that in your body? How does your body respond? I don't necessarily need the words for it, because the words that we use to describe emotions come from what we were taught or what we invented to describe it. And that's why people who grow up in abusive households sometimes have very strange definitions for things like love and safety that the rest of the world doesn't have. And so in addition to the two biggest things I think I do with anybody that I work with is get them reconnected to their body and what their body's telling them and how it feels. And also getting them aware of the language that they use to describe being alive, because the words we describe can get in our way. The two that I go after right out of the gate, which I was actually taught in acupuncture school to go out to address right out of the gate, are the word try. I'm going to try to get up early. I'm going to try to eat more vegetables. I'm going to try to, it's exhausting. First of all, you have to climb over the word try to get wherever you're going. And you can't actually try to do anything. You're either going to do it or you're not going to do it, or you may do it worse than you thought or better than you thought, or only partially.
But you can't try.
Something's going to happen. You can't try.
Yeah.
But what try does is it creates a in your system.
Yeah, and you're on edge because now I've got to, perform somehow. But
and you're like, it's like you're stuck at the starting block, and you can't get your feet are stuck on the starting block because you're trying to get off the starting block as opposed to just stepping off the starting block. The other one is the word stress, and stress was originally used for load-bearing walls and architectural structures and things like that. And about the 1940s, I've heard it started being used for people. The same way that people now use computer language to describe themselves. And all stress really means is, this is my habit of response in the face of X. I have to work with so-and-so and I hold my breath until we're done. Or I, have to do such and such a task and I clench my jaw until I'm done. And then what happens is we forget to breathe and we forget to unclench our jaw. And so it's about what is actually happening when that stress happens. What are you doing? I'm clenching my jaw. Okay. So maybe when you have to do this task, put something in place to remind yourself to start it with a loose jaw. Yeah. Or when you have to work with that person, let them be your reminder to breathe rather than.
Well, I went a step further and I tattooed "breathe" on my forearm and so I can remember whenever I get really, really stressed, then I just look at my arm and I go,
"Oh, right, and then oxygen. It's a good thing."
Yeah,
I'm all for being an asthmatic. I am all for oxygen. It's a great substance.
Okay. I was just going to say hello to Perry and Stephanie.
Who, hi Perry and Stephanie.
I'm not sure if they're still here, but Perry commented earlier a message about weirdos in the sea of octopuses, and he usually doesn't say octopuses; it's usually octopi. So.
Yes.
And Stephanie said, "Hello, my friends," and she also said that she loves the warming and the lifting that seems to be happening right now.
Yes. Well, on our half of the globe, anyway.
That's the thing. Hi, Stephanie. Oh, she's still there.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very interesting being, born in Namibia, desert was in my blood, and then growing up in the Western Cape, which is kind of very different, but also Southern Hemisphere and very, other way around to here. And wintertime for me, is intense. It's not a happy time. It doesn't work. Nothing is where it should be, because it should be summer and friends and family and it's dark and cold and miserable.
Yeah, no, it's a real thing. And your body came into the world aligned with the way the seasons move in the South.
Yeah.
And transplanting yourself. It's like being on a different planet or a different half of the planet.
Yeah, because it's well, and I think a lot of people go through it because a lot of people are displaced from where they, were born or had to move and transition. And like being barefoot is something I used to do all the time, inside, outside. You'd go to the shop barefoot because it's normal, it's usual. And it's different because it's just not right. The earth is cold and it doesn't feel like I'm drawing energy from it. So it's just it's very strange.
No, it's very different. I mean, when we moved to Minneapolis in 1990, I had lived I was from Georgia, lived in Virginia for a while, back to Georgia. I was in upstate New York for undergrad. I'd lived in London for a while, Austin, Texas. I was all over the place, Milwaukee. Anyway, but I mean, Syracuse, New York, it snows an average of 144 inches a year.
Sure.
So, I mean, it's a lot of snow. Yeah. And it's a lot of hills.
Yeah.
But cold in Minneapolis was very different because of the number of lakes inside the city limits. And we used to tell people when they'd move from other places, there is nothing as cold as your first winter in Minnesota. One, because you're not prepared for it. You don't have the right clothes. And two, your body goes into shock. But the flip of that was 11, 12 years later, we moved to Baltimore and we're still in shorts and barefooted and t-shirts in November, and everybody else has sweaters on and we have all the windows open. And because our bodies, not because it was the time of year that in your case, but because our bodies did not get the clue that it was cold yet. And so and what had happened was our bodies, we figured out like in September, our bodies started heating up to prepare for winter.
Yeah.
And then, so it took about 3 or 4 years to be like, nope, this is the climate now.
Yeah. And has it kind of equalized for you?
Yeah, it has. It, like I said, about 3 years it equalized, and my body was like, okay, just warn me if we're going back to the other one, which is the same with, being in the heat in Georgia. It's very different.
Which is complete opposite.
Yeah.
Stephanie's also saying, I feel the same way about winter, Michelle, but I don't like summer a whole lot either. Give me that nice renewal of spring and that beautiful death of fall.
Well, everybody has their thing, right?
Yeah, I think for me, heat can also be crazy because it's kind of, you can't really be either in that intense. We used to get 40, 43 to 5 degrees Celsius, which I have no idea what that is Fahrenheit. But it's hot. Very hot. And you can't really function that either. But you can be in the water. You'll be fine. So there's always a way. I just don't think. I don't know. Maybe do you think we have a flow? Someone was Patricia. I had a call with her the other day, and she was telling me about astro mapping.
Oh, I don't know that.
So I don't know. It would make sense that there are places in the world that would help, be in flow with you and your body and kind of your processes, creative processes and things like that.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I think, a really good example is my second oldest sister, who always loved hot weather. And I speak in the past tense because she passed away 2 years ago. She was 19 years older than me. But she had an opportunity, after years of living in the DC area, she had the opportunity to move to Cairo, Egypt.
Sure.
And it was her, in addition to it being, she got to arrive and be, the intellectual expat and do all these other things culturally. And it was right. She arrived 6 weeks before 9/11, and all these people that she had met casually came and found her to see if they could help.
Oh, wow.
Which is why she ended up staying there the rest of her life, primarily. But the temperature wise, the dry heat was, in addition to all the cultural aspects and other things that she fell in love with and that she found her place in. Yeah. I really think the dry heat really made a difference in how she moved, both physically and emotionally in that space. She was never happier than she was. She lived there almost 20 years. And she was never happier anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah, and that's our mission in life. I think I would suggest for us to find those places where we can be in flow and be the happiest that we can be. That is a dream.
Well, and also too, though, we have that potential internally. There's to be able to find it, and that's part of the masterclass thing. Yeah. I mean, there'll be information.
Yeah.
But there's going to be audience participation.
Oh, brilliant.
A lot of what I want people to learn, I want them to learn from themselves. I don't want them to learn, like in the same way that I say to my patients, the needles and the herbs, and I just make suggestions. You're the one that does all the work. Yeah. I want people to rediscover the wisdom that their body has about how to be in the world. Because if you think about it, when you're a little kid, unless there was something majorly medical or horrific going on, you'd eat when you're hungry, you sleep when you're tired, you're mad when you're mad, you're happy when you're happy. You fall down, you scrape your knee, you cry about it while it hurts, and you go do something else. Somebody else brings it up later and they ask you about it, and you're like, I got this really cool Band-Aid. And then you want to drag them off to show them what you're doing now. And as we get to be adults, we start having stories that we lay over it, and we hang on to things. You scrape your knee now, many people, not you, but many people, if they scrape their knee now as an adult, they will tell people about it all day. They might mention it tomorrow or next week.
Yeah.
Whereas the kid's like, done, gone, moving. And they have what we call a smooth flow of chi.
Yeah.
But it's the language, or it's the story. It's how we choose the stories that we put on top of things. When my son was really little, he He was about 2 when he got croup.
Yeah.
And he walked in and he said, "I sound like a goose. Make it stop."
Oh, sure.
And, we did all the things and we got it to stop. And a year later, when he was like 3.5 and he was starting to seriously differentiate and begin to lay stories on top of things, he got croup again and he flipped out. And I'm like, "You just sound like a goose. We just have to do what we did last time." Yeah. But he had created a story that it was a threat, when in fact it was no different than it had been. In fact, it was a lighter case than it had been the year before. But the story that he had gotten attached to and put into his body about it made it a threat.
And that is such a big thing that we do so easily in society, in mainstream, and in we're going to make it and dramatize it and create this whole thing around it, and therefore it builds and it builds. Why?
Well, I mean, historically, human beings have a tendency to remember the bad things, and it's to be able to avoid them. Don't go over there. There's a pack of hungry wolves. Not go over there. There's a cool bunch of butterflies. I mean, somebody might mention it, but it's not like avoid the wolves.
Yeah, well, you have to remember that, otherwise you're going to die. The butterflies are all great and amazing, but nothing's going to happen.
Right, exactly. And so it's, and part of the way that we create smoothness in ourselves, smoothness in our interactions, and that doesn't mean we're all agreeing all the time.
No,
that's never going to happen.
We agree all the time because we need to grow.
Well, exactly, and because we need to understand new ideas, and we need to be able to choose and not choose, and all of those things. But it's by creating bigger stories. It's by creating bigger stories to live in. That, I mean, on the one hand, I don't actually care about the story. If I'm dealing with somebody who is experiencing physical or emotional pain, I don't actually need to hear the whole story. I just need to know how their body's carrying it.
Yeah.
And I also want to help them craft some stories that might be contributing to the pain. Because, as the saying goes, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And a lot of the stories we create are too small and they create suffering.
So it's that whole Eckhart Tolle is the one that talks about kind of there is no suffering in the moment, because it's all about this, but it's around what we create. So it's those layers that we add to it that creates the problem. Because if right now, there is no problem right now, but there might have been one yesterday, and you might think that there's going to be one tomorrow, or, it's going to lead to that. And that also brings me back to a big theory that I am hoping to prove right one day, is that we actually know everything. We and our bodies and our everything is all knowing. We have all the answers, we have all that, but we need people along the way sometimes to remind us. And I think that is what people like you do very amazingly. It's kind of empowering and reminding us of our own inner wisdom in an egoless way. Well,
it's like my favorite doctor joke. Doctor, it hurts when I hit myself in the head with a board. Don't hit yourself in the head with a board.
Exactly.
My husband says my job is to point out the blatantly obvious.
Because no one looks there. Like, no one goes for the common sense and the kind of, well, maybe I can change my story because I made the story. So I can change it to anything I really want to.
Right.
But we also not taught that. I mean, we also taught that, you can't cry. You have to hold your pose and pretend that you're okay, instead of saying like, I'm not okay, or Well,
and it's interesting because, my parents were older when they had me. I mean, my mother was born in 1920 and my dad was born in 1917.
Oh, wow.
And so, this whole sitting down and discussing, I mean, you could discuss emotions, you could discuss human interaction. They were all for that. But this whole paying somebody to go talk to them about it, why would you do that? There's ministers and bartenders and friends. Why do you need, and my father's solution to practically everything was find a project, go do something.
Make yourself useful.
Yeah. Well, not even make yourself useful, but just do something. Put your energy into something else that,
Yeah.
And while there is he erred too far on the side of let's not talk about it. His getting his body moving and getting his body processing what it was holding allowed him to come around to more thoughtful, and like it's like when sometimes when we get our bodies engaged in doing something, whether it's exercise or emptying the dishwasher or doing whatever, we're moving some energy in a way that allows us to sort of unconsciously come to clearer thought.
Mm. Yeah.
It gets us out of our heads and into our bodies in a way that allows us to like be like, okay, that was all reactionary on my part. This still really matters. This point I really need to make. That one I really need to listen to, all the things to be able to find a way to interact in a healthy way for everybody concerned.
Yeah.
It's in the parlance of where I went to school, it's taking effect. Either take effect. The only two sane things you can do is take effective action or let it go. And so being able to take effective action in a way that furthers the conversation, but also removes the upset. So, and if I practice, I'm not great at it, particularly, as the mother of a teenager. But when I find myself upset about something, if I find myself my body tensing, I want to yell about something. I want to, if I can extract myself from the situation and go empty the dishwasher or go for a walk around the block or do something until I'm reasonable, I can still come back and be like, this was wrong and we need to fix this. But I can do it in a way that I can be heard.
But you can also process it first, like, okay, where am I actually, instead of I want to do something.
Right, exactly.
And for me, that magic lies in the pauses. So whether you just pause within yourself or remove yourself and pause and have that as a little bit of a routine. I've actually, now thinking about this week, I've kind of enjoyed my mornings where I can put the music on and do the dishwasher, and I sort everything out in my head.
It's a great way to do it. And there's all sorts of things around in the 5-element system that describe why that works that way. And it's a really simple way to one, get things done, and also move on with your interactions.
And you get to the end of it and you kind of clearer-minded, and the dishwasher's unpacked and the kitchen's clean, and you had some good music playing, and it's a win-win, definitely.
Everything's, and then you can go say something in a sane tone of voice that allows, they still may not agree with you, and
you might not care anymore.
Right. Well, it's not even it's that they're allowed to be their own ecosystem, or their own ecosystem's the wrong word, but their own their own contained system.
Yeah.
And not, everybody has their edges back, I guess is probably a good way to say it.
Yeah. And that's something we've also kind of started diving a little bit into within the Content College Club, and with Mickey through the Octopus Movement, is kind of human design. And I suppose just as another piece to the puzzle, how do we see ourselves from that aspect, which is also, I mean, it's planetary. Kind of, where were you when you were born, and how does that affect kind of who you are becoming, and maybe, how do you want to steer your life?
It's, I mean, the thing that I love about what I do, and also about frameworks like human design and other things like that, is that with systems like this, at least for me, I will never be bored. Each person is so deep and so wide. My experience of being a human is so deep and so wide, and I take this model and I lay it on top, and it's different every time, and it's fun. It's changed the way I move in the world, and it's I can't not think like that anymore.
Yeah, because it makes sense to you. And I'm very curious and very excited to kind of get a little bit of a deeper insight into it, because there's a lot of wisdom in connecting ourselves to these things that we find around us. I mean, these elements are, I think it was Aristotle that did that. What was it called? He also involved the elements in this. I'll have to go back and check again. My memory. I have these ideas, but they don't always connect.
I understand. Somebody said something once that blah blah blah. Yeah, I get it.
And it was about the wood and the fire and the air and the earth. So they all create this thing.
Yes.
Yeah, which is us, maybe.
Well, and I think it's important, back to the language that we use. I think it's important to not say we need to connect with nature. Yeah. I think it's a matter of remembering that we are nature. We are part of nature. We are all experiencing the shifts in the seasons. We just ignore them sometimes. Yeah. It's why in America, starting with Halloween, we pick up crazy speed through New Year's when everything is supposed to be slowing down and being quiet. And it doesn't mean that you can't get together and have fun and have parties, but there's a difference between a quiet, jovial gathering, or not quiet, but a winter jovial gathering versus a high summer barbecue. And so what happens though is that people kind of go completely against what their body wants to do because of tradition and habit and whatever else. And because it's fun, a lot of it. Yeah. But they burn through October to January, and then everybody's getting sick by February.
Yeah.
And they blame it on February, and it is not February's fault. It is the fact that they have not slept all winter. That exactly. They have not bothered to listen to their body that said, "Can we go home now? Can we take a nap?" So my favorite thing to do at a Christmas party is to sit and physically sink down into winter energy, into stillness and quiet. And it's amazing the number of people that come and sit and talk to me. They're like, it's so comfortable over here. Yeah. It's so quiet over here. And we'll laugh and we'll joke just like we're doing now. But it'll come from that much deeper place that allows people to oh, right, I have a body. I can be quiet in it.
Yeah. And we forgot about this kind of aspect to our being is our body and our connections to parts of ourselves. I mean, the things that go wrong usually have a point of reference or a connection to something that's out of alignment.
It's just trying to get our attention.
Yeah.
And it's either trying to get us to do something, stop us from doing something, or protect us somehow. And then it gets stuck sometimes if we don't pay attention.
Yeah. Well, because it's just trying to keep on going. Go on now. Listen to me.
Exactly. It's like, fine, I'll just leave that Post-it note on the refrigerator until you see it, and I'll go on and do this other thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, in essence, we need to follow our hearts so that we can listen to our bodies.
Exactly. Or follow your bodies because your heart's part of it.
That's it. Yeah. A very important part of it.
Yes. Which Western medicine is catching up on. Anyway. I could
slowly.
Well, but they are aware now that it has a communication network with most of the rest of the body. And
they are waking up to it. I think they actually have a term for it now. Cardioneurology, something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which is good. It's a good starting point.
A whole other, I could go off on that for a little while, so we can.
Yeah, I think we do need to have a conversation about that one day, because I really am fascinated by it, and especially Greg Braden has kind of brought it to my attention more. Kind of the coherence between the mind and the heart, or the brain and the heart specifically.
Well, in Chinese medicine, the heart is in the mind is in your heart.
Yeah.
Any mental illness is a heart imbalance.
So mind, but brain. So those two are very separate.
Yeah.
And the mind and heart. Yeah, there's a lot around that, and I think we do need to have a conversation about that soon. Where do we send people to? I assume it is drjanicecampbell.com.
Yes. However, I haven't, because I just recently created this website. I have not set up an email for it yet. Okay. So the email is jc@movingqi.com. So that's jc@movingqi.com.
Cool.
Or,
and that's or LinkedIn.
Or LinkedIn also works.
And that's
Yep. Yeah. Although it's a dot before the com, but yeah.
Yeah. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. And pick my brain and
pick my brain and go to you can also just go to drjaniccampbell.com and there's a link to the pick my brain thing.
There we go.
And there's also a link to my Moving G site, which you can wander around there for days if you want.
And there's a course for practitioners on kind of communicating with their clients or patients better.
Well, I'm working on that. I'm actually working on a book about that.
Book.
No, it's okay.
And there's
I have to keep up with my projects. You do not have to keep up with all my projects.
I try.
But yeah, no, and we're also on the learning platform. There'll be things for both the general public and for the for practitioners as well. And so that'll be launched in the next month or two. We're quickly getting faculty. I mean, we've already got our LLC. We're quickly getting faculty. I'll put it out all over everywhere when it's available.
And if you want to join us on the 25th of May, which is in 2 weeks and 1 day,
yes.
Janice is going to teach us or show us, I suppose. We're going to experience a little bit more and help us remember about the 5 elements of creativity. And I'm really looking forward to it. And then, of course, there is the Content College Club, which we're having lots of fun. And there's some interesting stuff going there as well. Yeah.
I highly recommend it. I mean, the club. You can come talk. Listen to me talk. All right.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Janice. I really appreciate and I love chatting to you always. Yeah, we will see you. Well, I'll see you on WhatsApp and everywhere else, but the rest of them can come and see you on the 25th.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much. This was fun.
Thanks a lot.